On the 17th of September 1944, the British Second Army launched Operation Market Garden, a combined airborne and ground offensive into the Netherlands. The aim of the operation was for 1 British and 2 American airborne divisions to drop behind enemy lines and capture a series of bridges near the cities of Eindhoven, Nijmegen and Arnhem. Second Army, headed by General Miles Dempsey, was to then advance north, link up with each airborne division, and establish itself astride the Zuider Zee, thus opening the way for an advance into northern Germany. Among the units of Second Army involved in the operation was the 15th 19th King's Royal Hussars, who moved up to Eindhoven on the 19th of September and passed under the command of the American 101st Airborne Division. Within the division, a squadron of the Hussars was attached to the US 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. Describing the initial experience of working with their American counterparts, the history of the 15th 19th King's Royal Hussars records that cooperation with the Americans was not easy. There'd been too little time to get together beforehand, and naturally each of us found the methods of the other not easily intelligible. But this strangeness wore off during the next 2 days. After being employed on various tasks throughout Eindhoven, the evening of the 19th of September found a squadron of the 15th 19th Hussars concentrated in the suburbs of Lokhoven and Tongeré. It was here, on the following morning, that the squadron was instructed to send a small force to the village of Nederwetten, with the intention of broadening the Allied position around Eindhoven and securing the eastern flank of the bridge at Son. Commanding this force was to be Captain Christopher Weatherby, the squadron's second in command, who would have at his disposal a 95mm Centaur tank, 2 scout cars and 3 troop of A squadron, which itself consisted of 1 17-pounder Challenger and 3 Cromwell tanks. In addition, a group of US paratroopers from A Company of the 1st Battalion, the 506th Regiment, were to be attached to Weatherby's force to provide the British armour with infantry support. The advance on Nederwetten began in the mid-morning of the 20th of September 1944, and by around midday, Weatherby's force had reached a point just south of the village. Here, the Challenger and 3 Cromwell tanks of 3 troop moved into a position off the main road, from where they could cover the western and eastern approaches into the village, whilst the paratroopers of A Company dug in nearby and pushed out patrols to secure the flanks. At the same time, one of the scout cars was sent forward to assess the German strength inside Nederwetten, with the war diary of the 15th 19th King's Royal Hussars stating that Lieutenant Benjamin Sparrow was again sent forward in his scout car towards Nederwetten, and on approaching the village saw a German cyclist and a few infantry, which he fired on, killing one and probably wounding another. Lieutenant Sparrow was then ordered to withdraw, and a patrol of American infantry was sent forward, covered by the tanks. Among the tanks covering the American patrol was the Cromwell commanded by Lieutenant Christopher Egerton, who had been serving with the 15th 19th King's Royal Hussars since the start of the war and was the commander of 3 troop. Serving under him in his Cromwell tank was Lance Corporal Searle, Lance Corporal Haves, Trooper Fredrik Crump and Trooper Garnet Hyde. From their position on the outskirts of Nederwetten, Lieutenant Egerton and his Cromwell had just finished up providing cover to the American patrol, when suddenly, at around 1300, the lieutenant observed 2 German Panther tanks moving in a field to the northwest. Immediately, Lieutenant Egerton ordered his gunner, Trooper Fredrik Crump, to open fire on the enemy targets, and within seconds, an armoured piercing round had been loaded into the breech of the Cromwell's 75mm main gun and fired at one of the Panthers. Remarkably, not only did Trooper Crump score a direct hit on one of the German tanks, but he also succeeded in knocking it out with his first shot, with the AP round piercing the side armour of the Panther. Meanwhile, one of the other Cromwells, commanded by Sergeant Nesbitt, had opened up on the second Panther, but unfortunately none of the rounds it fired were able to find their target, and the Panther slowly rolled on into the fog of war. Following this engagement, Captain Christopher Weatherby directed elements of his force to move up and enter the southeastern part of Nederwetten, and it was during this move that Lieutenant Egerton, at around 1400, got eyes on another Panther tank located outside the village church. According to British reports, this was the third Panther to have been encountered that day, but there is a possibility that it was in fact the same one that Sergeant Nesbitt had fired upon an hour earlier, although it is impossible to state with certainty that this was the case. Nevertheless, after spotting the enemy tank, Lieutenant Christopher Egerton manoeuvred his Cromwell into a suitable position, from where Trooper Crump fired 4 armoured-piercing rounds in quick succession. Like before, the trooper successfully hit the target with all 4 of his shots and managed to knock out the Panther tank, with the history of the 15th 19th King's Royal Hussars noting that. When this third tank was examined later, it was found that all 4 shots which he had fired had scored hits. 2 in the driver's compartment, 1 just above the tracks, and 1 in the engine. Excellent shooting by the gunner, Trooper Crump. Thus, within the space of 40 minutes, Lieutenant Christopher Egerton and the crew of his Cromwell tank had successfully engaged and knocked out 2 Panthers, with all 5 rounds that had been fired hitting their target. Thereafter, the force under Captain Weatherby remained in its position in the southeast corner of Nederwetten until the afternoon of the 20th of September, during which time he destroyed a further 2 German half-tracks, damaged a third, and took 5 German infantrymen as prisoners of war. In addition, 3 more Cromwells from 2 Troop of A Squadron, as well as elements of the 1st Royal Dragoons, had been sent forward to reinforce the gains that had been made. However, as the history of the 15th 19th Hussars continues, the enemy's small arms fire now increased and an 88mm gun joined in, firing down the road. It was therefore decided at 1540 to draw back a short way. Orders were later received at 1700 on the 20th of September for Weatherby force to rejoin the squadron at Eindhoven, which it reached at 1800 hours. Over the course of the fighting around Nederwetten, the British-American force has suffered no casualties, whilst at the same time it had inflicted heavy losses upon the numerically superior German force, who had lost 2 Panthers, 2 half-tracks, 5 POWs, and an unknown number of infantry who had either been killed or wounded in action. It was because of this feat, and for his command and leadership on the 20th of September, that Captain Christopher Weatherby would be awarded the Military Cross, Britain's 3rd highest military decoration. Interestingly, neither Lieutenant Christopher Egerton or Trooper Fredrik Crump would be officially recognised for their actions at Nederwetten, and even today, the story of how their Cromwell tank single-handedly took out 2 German Panthers is rarely told or even known. That said, the war diary of the 15th 19th King's Royal Hussars does highlight the key role Lieutenant Egerton played during the battle, with the diary commenting that, "Throughout this period, Lieutenant Egerton's conduct had been exceptionally good. He had been in the lead on the move up, and his command of his troop was most effective. His coolness during the fight in the village had a direct bearing on the operation as a whole, and he also remained in the village to cover the remainder of the party out during the withdrawal."